Imagine a situation where you are walking down a busy street and suddenly a thought about an old friend pops into your head. You haven't seen him in 10 years. You haven't said his name. But 3 seconds later, your phone rings. It's him. Coincidence? We didn't decide to think about him at that particular moment, did we? The thought just popped into our head. And if we don't choose our thoughts, do we control our minds at all? In a universe governed by strict laws of probability, coincidences should not exist. Physics suggests that what you just experienced was not a random event. It was a leak. It was a momentary crack in the firewall of reality. We usually assume that life is a series of random events floating in chaos. We believe that we improvise as we go through time. But new data from quantum mechanics, number theory, and neurobiology are beginning to paint a much darker picture. They suggest that the script was written long before you were born. This video is not about magic. It's about the mathematics of fate. We will look at 46 specific anomalies. From the freezing of subatomic particles to the sinking of the Titanic, that prove that chance is just a word we use to hide the bars of the cage. To understand why the cage exists, we don't need a particle accelerator. We just need to look at a subway station in London in 1973. The actor Anthony Hopkins had just signed a contract to star in a film called The Girl from Petrovka. He was a professional. He wanted to study the novel before shooting began. He went to every bookstore in London. He searched the libraries, but the book was out of print. It was gone. Frustrated and angry, Hopkins gave up. He went down into the Leicester Square tube station to catch a train home. He sat on a bench, and there, lying alone on the empty seat next to him, was a book. He picked it up. It was The Girl from Petrovka. Now, your brain wants to call this lucky. But the math says it is impossible. In a city of 9 million people, what are the odds of finding the exact out-of-print object you need at the exact second you give up looking for it? But the story gets worse. A year later, on the set of the movie, Hopkins met the author of the novel, George Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer didn't have a copy of his own book. He told Hopkins that he had lent his personal copy, the one filled with his own handwritten notes, to a friend who had lost it in a stolen car somewhere in London. Hopkins went to his bag. He pulled out the book he found on the subway bench. He opened it. The margins were filled with handwritten notes. It wasn't just a copy, it was the copy. If you calculate the probability of this chain of events, the lost car, the subway bench, the timing, the meeting, it is roughly 1 in 10 billion. In physics, a probability of 1 in 10 billion isn't an accident. It is a trajectory. It implies that the book didn't happen to be there. It implies that the book was placed there. Think about the timing. That book was lost a year earlier. It traveled through the city for 365 days just to land on that bench at the exact moment he sat down. It was like a bullet fired in slow motion. So ask yourself, is your future coming for you right now? And can you even stop it? And if the book was placed, then Hopkins was not an actor making a choice. He was an actor hitting his mark. Let's talk about what we actually mean when we say the word coincidence. Usually, it's just a situation where the odds feel incredibly low, like thinking about a specific person right before you turn the corner and run into them. We look at that moment and think, wow, what are the chances? But back in 1986, a mathematician named John Littlewood decided to stop guessing and actually check the mechanics of how chance works in a human life. He wanted to see if these events are genuinely rare, or if our brains are just bad at understanding how much data we consume every day. To figure this out, Littlewood built a mathematical model of a standard human day. He needed to define a basic unit of experience, so he came up with the concept of an event. Here is how the logic works. An event is simply anything that takes your brain about 1 second to notice and process. It doesn't have to be a car crash or a winning lottery ticket. Looking at this screen is an event. Hearing a car drive by outside is an event. itching your nose is an event. Littlewood estimated that a normal person is awake and actively paying attention to the world for about 8 hours a day. The rest is sleep or zoning out. Now, if we take that 1 event per second rule and do the math, the volume of data is actually shocking. There are 60 seconds in a minute, so that is 60 events. There are 60 minutes in an hour, which gives us 3,600 distinct events every single hour. If you multiply that by the 8 hours you spend awake, it turns out that you are processing roughly 30,000 separate events every single day. Most of the time, this is just boring data. It's just the texture of the wall or the color of the sky. But statistically, the laws of probability apply to every single one of those 30,000 moments, not just the ones that feel special. So, Littlewood asked, what happens if we let this counter run for a month? If you just live your normal, boring life for 35 days, the math says you will have processed roughly 1 million of these distinct events. And this is the punchline. If we define a wild coincidence as something with a probability of 1 in a million, and you are essentially rolling the dice 1 million times every month, then the laws of statistics say you have to hit that number eventually. It isn't a spooky anomaly. It is just a massive sample size. If you roll a 1,000,000-sided die 1 million times, landing on the number 1 isn't luck. It is a mathematical certainty. This mathematical certainty leads us to a conclusion that completely strips the romance out of the concept of destiny. If Littlewood is correct, and you are statistically mandated to experience a 1 in a million event every 35 days, then a miracle is no longer special. It is a quota. We usually treat these moments, like running into your ex-partner in a foreign country or dreaming of a disaster before it happens, as evidence that the universe is watching us. We take them as personal messages. But under the law of large numbers, the universe isn't sending you a message. It is just running a script. Think about the scale of this on a planetary level. There are 8 billion people on Earth. If every single one of them lives a normal life, encountering 1 million events per month, then statistically, 8 billion miracles must happen on this planet every 30 days. If they didn't happen, that would be the violation of physics. It means that the incredible synchronization Anthony Hopkins experienced wasn't a magic trick. It was just his turn. He was simply the data point that happened to fall into that specific slot on the probability curve. This turns the idea of synchronicity from a mystical connection into a boring industrial byproduct of a massive system. It implies that the universe generates chaos at such a high volume that it accidentally creates patterns that look like order. We call it fate because our brains are desperate for a story. But to the universe, your destiny is just a statistical error that hasn't been rounded down yet. You are not the protagonist of a movie, you are just a random number generator that eventually rolled a row of zeros. And if your most significant life moments are just inevitable mathematical noise, what does that say about the decisions you think you are making? Now we need to run a diagnostic on the hardware inside your own skull. Because the reason these coincidences feel so impossible isn't just about the universe generating events. It is about the fact that your brain is fundamentally incapable of processing the math of chaos. There is a famous problem in probability theory called the birthday paradox, and it exposes a critical flaw in human logic. Imagine you walk into a room where there are 23 random people, a football team and their coaches, or a classroom. I ask you to bet money on a simple question. What are the chances that 2 people in that room share the exact same birthday? Your brain immediately starts doing the calculation. You think about yourself. You know there are 365 days in a year. You look at the 23 people. The number 23 seems tiny compared to 365. So, your logic tells you the odds must be low. Maybe 5%? Maybe 10% if you're lucky? If you bet on those odds, you would lose your money. The actual mathematical probability of a match in a group of just 23 people is over 50%. It is a coin toss. If you increase the crowd to just 75 people, a partially filled movie theater, or a bus, the probability shoots up to 99.9%. It becomes a statistical guarantee. How is this possible? Why does it feel so wrong? The glitch happens because your brain is asking the wrong question. You're thinking, what are the odds that someone here has my birthday? That is a linear calculation. You are comparing one specific data point, you, against 22 others. In that case, the odds are indeed low, but the universe doesn't care about you. The universe is looking for any match between any two people. This is called an exponential increase in complexity. Think of it like handshakes. If you are alone in a room, there are 0 handshakes. If a second person enters, there is 1 connection. If a third person enters, suddenly there are 3 possible connections. The first pair, the second pair, and the pair linking the first and last person. By the time you get to 23 people, you aren't dealing with 23 dates. You're dealing with 253 unique pairs of potential connections. You have 253 lottery tickets, and you only need one of them to hit the jackpot. Our ancestors didn't need to understand exponential math to survive on the savannah. They only needed to count lions linearly. 1 lion is bad, 2 are worse. But in a complex system like a modern city or the internet, we are drowning in these exponential connections. This proves that the world is significantly more crowded than you perceive. The space for randomness is much smaller than it looks. When you meet a stranger who went to the same high school as you, or shares your rare last name, it isn't a sign that the stars aligned. It is a sign that you are standing in a room with 75 people, and the math says a collision is 99.9% inevitable. The cage is tighter than you think. If the birthday paradox proves that our biological hardware is bad at processing crowds, this next anomaly proves something much more disturbing about the software of the universe itself. We generally assume that numbers are fair. If I asked you to look at a list of natural, chaotic data, like the lengths of every river on Earth, or the population of every town in Peru, or the dollar amount of every electricity bill in New York, you would expect the numbers to be random. You would assume that the first digit of those numbers is equally likely to be a 1, a 5, or a 9. It feels like a standard roll of the dice. But in 1938, a physicist named Frank Benford noticed that the universe has a bias. And it is not a small bias. It is a massive, structural rig. He analyzed 20,000 different datasets, from atomic weights to baseball statistics. He found that in naturally occurring chaotic systems, the number 1 is not just another digit. It appears as the leading digit 30% of the time. Think about how broken that sounds. There are 9 possible digits. If the world were truly random, the number 1 should only appear about 11% of the time, but it appears nearly 3 times more often than it should. The number 9, on the other hand, is suppressed. It only appears as the first digit 5% of the time. This pattern, now known as Benford's law, is so precise and so universal that it acts like a digital fingerprint for reality. It implies that the chaos of nature isn't chaotic at all. It follows a strict logarithmic script. The universe loves the small numbers and suppresses the big ones. This is not just a mathematical curiosity, it is a weaponized fact. The Internal Revenue Service, IRS, actually uses this law to catch tax cheats. When a human tries to commit fraud, they invent numbers that they think look random. They distribute the digits equally because their brain tells them that is what random looks like. But because they don't follow the Benford script, their fake tax returns stand out like a neon sign against the background of real, mathematically biased reality. This is the horror of the realization. You can only fake randomness if you don't understand the code. But nature understands the code perfectly. It implies that the lengths of rivers, the stars in the sky, and the money in your bank account are not free-floating values. They are constrained by a hidden algorithm that dictates the probability of their existence. The game is rigged, and the dice are loaded. So the numbers are rigged. But surely, if we look up at the night sky, we are looking at pure, unadulterated freedom. The stars are scattered across the galaxy in a chaotic spray of plasma. When we look up and see a shape, like the Big Dipper or Orion, we tell ourselves that we are inventing that shape. We think constellations are just human imagination drawing lines between random dots. But in 1930, a British mathematician named Frank Ramsey proved that we are not inventing anything. He proved that the shapes are mandatory. Ramsey theory is a branch of mathematics that studies the conditions under which order must appear. And his central theorem is terrifyingly simple. Complete disorder is impossible. The math proves that if you have a large enough set of data, like billions of stars scattered in a galaxy, it is mathematically impossible to avoid creating recognizable patterns. If you scatter enough points on a graph, eventually you must create a perfect triangle. If you add more points, you must create a perfect square. It is not a matter of chance, it is a matter of saturation. Ramsey proved that within any sufficiently large system, pockets of strict order will spontaneously generate, simply because there are no other options left. The chaos runs out of ways to be chaotic. This completely reframes the concept of destiny. We tend to think of destiny as a mystical force that guides you to a specific person or event. But Ramsey theory suggests that destiny is just geometry working on a massive scale. If you interact with enough people and make enough choices, a pattern must emerge. You had to meet that person. You had to have that accident. Not because a god wrote a script for you personally, but because the universe is a finite system that is forced to repeat structures. We are trapped in a system that forbids true uniqueness. Just as the stars are forced to form the shape of a hunter or a bear, your life is forced to form a narrative arc. You are not writing your story. You are just connecting the dots that were mathematically required to be there from the moment the Big Bang scattered the data. Chaos is not the absence of order. Chaos is just order that hasn't been recognized yet. If Ramsey theory suggests that the structure of your life is geometrically inevitable, this next concept suggests that the specific details, every word you speak, every mistake you make, and the exact moment you die are already written down. And they have been written down forever. You probably remember the number pi from high school geometry. You know it as 3.14. It is the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. It seems like a harmless, abstract tool for engineers. But mathematicians suspect that pi is something much more terrifying. They believe pi is what is known as a normal number. Because pi is an irrational number, its decimal expansion goes on forever, and it never repeats a pattern. It is an infinite string of random digits. And if a string is truly infinite and random, then by definition, it must contain every possible finite sequence of numbers. This sounds technical, but the implications are absolute. If you convert the letters of the alphabet into numbers, say, using standard binary code, then somewhere deep in the infinite tale of pi, you will find the complete works of Shakespeare. You will find the Bible, you will find the code for the operating system of your phone. But those are just books and codes. It gets personal. Somewhere in that string of digits, there is a sequence that perfectly describes the genetic code of your DNA. Somewhere else, there is a sequence that describes the exact position of every atom in your body right now. And further down the line, there is a sequence that describes the coordinates of your grave and the date on your tombstone. This information isn't being generated by the number, it is contained within it. Since the number pi is a fundamental constant of mathematics, meaning it existed before the Big Bang and will exist after the heat death, this implies that your entire biography is not a future event. It is a static piece of data that has always existed. We tend to think of time as a process of writing a story. We think we are creating the future. But the existence of pi suggests that the universe is just a decompression algorithm. The future is just data that is already encrypted in the fundamental constants of reality, waiting to be read. You aren't living a life. You are just slowly unzipping a file that was already on the hard drive. And every choice you make is just the next digit in the expansion. So the math says the universe is rigged with patterns, but even if it wasn't, you would still see them. Because the final nail in the coffin of free will isn't out there in the stars, it is right behind your eyes. We need to talk about why you see faces on Mars, animals in the clouds, or religious figures on a piece of burnt toast. We call this apophenia. It is the tendency of the human brain to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. For a long time, we thought this was just a quirk of imagination. But evolutionary biology tells us it is actually a survival patch encoded into your firmware. Think about a human ancestor walking through the tall grass of the savannah 100,000 years ago. He hears a rustle in the bushes. His brain has to make a split-second calculation. It has to choose between two types of statistical errors. A type 1 error is a false positive. He assumes the rustle is a tiger, but it is actually just the wind. If he makes this mistake, he runs away, looks a bit stupid, and wastes some energy. But he survives. A type 2 error is a false negative. He assumes the rustle is just the wind, but it is actually a tiger. If he makes this mistake, he is dead. Natural selection is a brutal filter. It systematically killed off every relaxed, skeptical human who waited for more evidence. The only people who survived to pass on their genes, your direct ancestors, were the paranoid ones. The ones who saw tigers in the wind. The ones who saw patterns where there were no patterns. You are the descendant of a lineage of hypersensitive pattern-matching machines. This means that synchronicity is largely a biological hallucination. When you see the number 1111 on the clock, or when a song comes on the radio that matches your mood, your brain is triggering a dopamine reward for finding a connection. It feels meaningful because it feels safe. The brain is terrified of true randomness because randomness equals danger. So, it overcorrects. It stitches the chaotic data of the world into a narrative quilt to keep you from panicking. You aren't seeing the truth of the universe. You are seeing a user interface designed to keep a scared ape from being eaten. We are programmed to find the script, even if we have to invent it ourselves. We have established that your brain is a pattern-seeking machine. But what if the brain isn't just perceiving the patterns? What if it is actively breaking the machine? In the history of quantum mechanics, there is one ghost story that physicists don't like to talk about because it blurs the line between science and superstition. It concerns Wolfgang Pauli, one of the fathers of quantum theory and a Nobel Prize winner. Pauli was a theoretical genius, but he was a disaster for reality. His colleagues began to notice a statistical anomaly. Whenever Pauli walked into a laboratory, sensitive experimental equipment would spontaneously fail. Vacuum tubes would shatter. Beakers would crack. Meters would malfunction without any physical cause. They called it the Pauli effect. This wasn't a joke. It was a genuine operational hazard. The experimental physicist Otto Stern was so afraid of this phenomenon that he officially banned Pauli from entering his laboratory in Hamburg. He believed that Pauli's sheer theoretical intensity was collapsing the wave functions of the equipment around him. But the most terrifying example happened in Göttingen. One afternoon, a complex and expensive piece of apparatus in James Frank's laboratory suddenly exploded. It was a catastrophic failure. The scientists were baffled because the cause was inexplicable. They comforted themselves by saying, "At least Pauli wasn't here." But they were wrong. They later checked the train schedules. At the exact millisecond the machine exploded, a train carrying Wolfgang Pauli had stopped at the Göttingen station. He wasn't even in the room. He was just in the radius. This suggests that a sufficiently powerful consciousness acts like a jamming signal. It implies that the laws of physics are not set in stone. They are sensitive to the presence of an observer. Your mind is not a passive camera recording the world. It is a radioactive isotope that corrupts the data just by being there. If Pauli showed us that the mind can break machinery, Carl Jung showed us that it can hack the script of nature itself. In 1952, the famous psychologist was treating a woman who was proving impossible to cure. She was hyper-rational. She didn't believe in the subconscious. She treated her life like a spreadsheet, dismissing anything that couldn't be explained by logic. Jung knew he couldn't help her unless he could break that rational shell. One day, she was sitting in his office, telling him about a dream she had the night before. In the dream, someone had given her a piece of jewelry in the shape of a golden scarab beetle. She was analyzing the dream coldly, dismissing it as random noise. But exactly at that moment, there was a gentle tapping on the window behind Jung. Jung turned around. Something was trying to get in. He opened the latch and caught the insect as it flew into the dark room. It was a Cotonia aurata, the common rose chafer. It is a beetle with a metallic, golden-green shell. It was the closest thing to a golden scarab that exists in the Swiss climate. Jung held the beetle out to his stunned patient and said, "Here is your scarab." The shock of that moment shattered her rational defenses. The barrier between her internal dream and the external reality had collapsed. Jung coined a term for this phenomenon: synchronicity. He defined it not as a coincidence, but as a causal connecting principle. He argued that the mind and the physical world are not two separate things. They are two sides of the same coin. When your internal psychic tension gets high enough, like the woman's desperate need for a breakthrough, it ruptures the wall. The dream spills out into the street. This means that reality is not a solid container. It is a responsive membrane. And if you push hard enough from the inside, the membrane stretches, and the universe is forced to print the object of your thoughts in 3D. To understand how a thought can turn into a beetle, or how a physicist can explode a machine, we have to look at the bedrock of modern reality, the Copenhagen interpretation. This was the moment in 1927 when physics stopped being about stuff and started being about information. Before this, we believed the universe was like a dark room filled with furniture. We assumed that even if you weren't in the room, the chair was still sitting there, solid and defined. But Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg proved that the subatomic furniture doesn't behave like that. They discovered that an electron is not a little hard ball orbiting a nucleus. When you are not looking at it, the electron physically ceases to have a location. It dissolves. It becomes a wave function, a ghostly cloud of mathematical probability that exists everywhere at once. It is in the corner, it is in the center, and it is on the ceiling simultaneously. This state is called superposition. The electron only snaps into a solid, single position at the exact moment you try to measure it. The act of observation forces the universe to make a choice. It forces the fuzzy wave to collapse into a hard particle. This implies something terrifying about the nature of your own eyes. You're not just passively receiving light. Your gaze is an active force. It acts like a laser that burns probability into reality. Without an observer, the universe is just a haze of maybe. It takes a conscious mind to force the maybe to become is. The world doesn't exist until you look at it. Before that, it's just a menu of potential nightmares waiting to be selected. Now, take that subatomic logic and scale it up to the size of your life. This is where the concept of synchronicity stops being mystical and becomes a mechanical necessity. You usually think of a coincidence, like meeting that old friend on the street, as something you stumbled into. You think the street was there, the friend was there, and you just happened to walk onto the set. But under the Copenhagen interpretation, that is not what happened. Before you turned the corner, the street was a superposition of infinite possibilities. In one version, the street was empty. In another, it was raining. In another, your friend was there. The wave function of the city contained all these timelines simultaneously. But you were carrying a specific mental charge. Maybe you were lonely. Maybe you were thinking about the past. That mental state acted as the measurement device. When you turned the corner, your observation collapsed the wave function, And because your internal state was biased, it collapsed the reality into the specific version that matched your thoughts. You didn't meet your friend. You pulled them out of the quantum void. This reverses the arrow of cause and effect. The event didn't happen to you. The event happened because of you. You are not the victim of these coincidences. You are the perpetrator. You are constantly collapsing the chaos of the universe into a story that matches your internal frequency. And if you are depressed, or scared, or paranoid, you are literally programming the quantum field to manifest monsters around the next corner. The Copenhagen interpretation solves the problem of how atoms behave, but it creates a new logical nightmare that is arguably worse. It suggests that reality is a contagion passed from one observer to another, with no solid ground to stand on. In 1961, the Nobel Prize winning physicist Eugene Wigner realized that the standard model had a fatal flaw. He illustrated it with a thought experiment that breaks the universe. You know Schrödinger's cat. The cat in the box is both dead and alive until you open the lid. You are the observer. You collapse the wave function. But Wigner asked, what if I am standing outside the room while you open the box? From my perspective, you are now part of the experiment. Until I open the door to the lab and ask you what you saw, you are in a superposition of saw a live cat and saw a dead cat. You don't technically exist as a defined person yet. You are just a cloud of probability. But it doesn't stop there. What if there is a third scientist waiting outside the building? To him, the entire laboratory, including me and you, is a wave function. This is called the von Neumann chain, named after the mathematician John von Neumann. He proved that you can keep zooming out forever. There is no mathematical point where the quantum haze stops and solid reality begins. This leads to a terrifying paradox known as infinite regress. If the universe requires an observer to collapse it into existence, then who observes the observer? Does the universe dissolve when we all close our eyes? There are only two ways to solve this equation, and both are horrific. Option 1. Solipsism. You are the only real observer. Everything else, your friends, the stars, this video, is just a wave function generated by your mind. You are alone in the void. Option 2. The cosmic observer. For the universe to have existed before humans evolved, there must be a universal mind, a god or a super administrator who is constantly looking at every atom in the cosmos to keep it solid. Wigner's paradox proves that objective materialism is dead. You cannot have a universe made of dead rocks. You either need a lonely god, or you need to accept that you are living in a dream where the scenery only loads when you look at it. If you think the power of the observer is limited to quantum particles in a lab, you are mistaken. The most dangerous laboratory is your own body, and the observer is currently rewriting your biological code. We all know the placebo effect. You give a sick patient a sugar pill, tell them it is medicine, and they get better. We treat this as a positive thinking trick, but we ignore its evil twin, the nocebo effect. This is the biological mechanism where the mind uses its authority to murder the body. If a doctor hands you a glass of water and tells you, with absolute conviction, that it is a potent poison, your body will believe the narrative over the chemical reality. Your brain will trigger a fight or flight response so severe that it can cause actual physical harm. In clinical trials for chemotherapy, patients who were given harmless saline solution but thought it was chemo actually lost their hair. Their perfectly healthy cells committed suicide simply because the mind commanded it. There is a documented case of a man who attempted suicide by swallowing 26 pills. He was rushed to the hospital with a blood pressure of 80/40, critically low. He was collapsing. He was dying. But when the doctors analyzed the empty bottle, they realized the pills were harmless supplements from a clinical trial. He hadn't taken any poison. But his mind believed the script. It believed the script so hard that it physically shut down his cardiovascular system to match the expectation of death. This proves that your biology is not a hardwired machine. It is a 3D printer that takes instructions from your consciousness. If you constantly fear a disease, you are sending a compilation code to your cells to simulate the symptoms. If you are terrified of an accident, you are programming your nervous system to freeze at the critical moment. The observer effect inside your body means that you are not just the pilot of the vessel, you are the architect of its failure. Every paranoid thought you have is a line of code that your heart and lungs are forced to execute. You can literally think yourself into a grave. So, we accept that the mind can kill the body. We accept that the nocebo effect is real because the brain is connected to the heart by nerves. It makes mechanical sense, but surely that is where the power ends. You cannot stare at a rock and make it move. You are not a Jedi. Or so we thought until the 1970s, when a physicist named Helmut Schmidt decided to test the telekinetic capacity of the average human employee. Schmidt wasn't a fringe mystic working in a basement. He was a physicist at Boeing Science Research Laboratories. He wanted to know if the observer effect could extend beyond the human skin. To test this, he built a machine driven by the most purely random process in the known universe, radioactive decay. He used strontium-90. When an atom of strontium-90 decays, it emits an electron. This is a quantum event. It is fundamentally unpredictable. Schmidt connected a Geiger counter to this decay and hooked it up to a circle of lights. If the atom decayed one way, the light moved clockwise. If it decayed the other, it moved counterclockwise. Left alone, the machine was perfect. The lights moved randomly, 50-50. Then, Schmidt brought in regular people. He asked them to sit in front of the machine and simply want the light to move clockwise. He didn't ask them to focus or meditate, just to intend. The results were disturbing. Over tens of thousands of trials, the machine broke. The randomness skewed. The lights began to move in the direction the subjects wanted, deviating from the statistical baseline by about 1 to 2%. Now, 1% sounds like nothing. If you are buying milk, 1% is a rounding error. But in physics, a 1% deviation in the decay rate of a radioactive isotope is an earthquake. It is like dropping a pen and having it fall slightly sideways because you looked at it. The odds of this happening by chance were calculated at roughly 1 in 10 million. This suggests that thought is not just a ghost in the machine. Thought has mass. Thought has a microgravity that can reach out and tilt the probabilities of the physical world. If a bored employee at Boeing can nudge an atom of strontium just by wishing it, what are you doing to the fragile probability fields of your life when you obsess over a specific outcome for weeks? You aren't just waiting for the future, you are physically bending the track. This leads us to the start of Act 3, and the destruction of the biggest illusion you have, the idea that you are over here and the rest of the world is over there. In 1935, Albert Einstein saw the implications of quantum mechanics, and he hated them. He realized that if the math was right, the universe wasn't just weird, it was broken. He published a famous paper with his colleagues Podolsky and Rosen, the EPR paradox. In it, they tried to prove that quantum mechanics was incomplete because it allowed for something impossible. The math suggested that two particles could become entangled. This means they share a single mathematical existence. If you take two entangled electrons and separate them by the width of the entire galaxy, they are still the same object. If you measure the first electron and find it spinning up, the second electron will instantly, at that exact moment, snap into spin down. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance. He mocked it. He said, God does not play dice. His argument was based on the speed of light. Nothing can travel faster than light. If I poke an electron here, the signal cannot reach the other electron across the galaxy instantly. That would break the law of causality. Einstein argued that the particles must be like a pair of gloves. If I put a left glove in a box and send it to Mars and I keep the right glove here, I know the Mars glove is left the moment I look at my right one. Not because they communicated, but because they were always left and right from the start. He called this hidden variables. He died believing this. He died believing that the universe was local, that things only affect each other if they touch. But Einstein was wrong. He made the biggest mistake of his life because he was too scared to accept the alternative. He couldn't accept that distance is a lie. The EPR paradox wasn't a disproof of quantum mechanics. It was a prophecy. Einstein proved that either the world has hidden variables, gloves, or the universe is a single, interconnected web where space doesn't exist. He bet on the gloves. And as we are about to see, he lost the bet. The spooky action is real, and you are part of it. So the Nobel Prize confirmed it. The universe is non-local. But unless you are a photon flying through a fiber optic cable in a Swiss laboratory, why does this matter to you? It matters because of where you came from. Current cosmological models state that 13.8 billion years ago, everything in the known universe, every electron in your brain, every proton in the chair you're sitting on, and every neutron in the star Betelgeuse was crushed into a single point of infinite density, the singularity. In that moment, all matter was in contact, all matter was entangled. Then, the Big Bang happened. The universe expanded. The particles flew apart to create galaxies. But according to the rules of quantum entanglement, distance does not break the bond. If two particles interact once, they remain mathematically linked forever. This implies that the expansion of the universe is just a visual trick. It is an inflation of the empty space between the objects, but the objects themselves are still shaking hands on the quantum level. We need to stop thinking of the universe as a collection of separate items. We need to start thinking of it as a single server. Imagine a massive multiplayer online game. On your screen, your character looks distinct. You look different from the other players. You're standing in a different zone. You feel alone inside your avatar. But on the server rack in the data center, you are just a stream of voltage running through the same silicon wafer as everyone else. There is no physical gap between you and him. You are processing on the same circuit. This explains the spooky feeling of knowing who is calling before you pick up the phone. It isn't telepathy. Telepathy implies sending a signal from radio A to radio B across a distance. This is direct file access. Since your brain is made of particles that have been entangled with the rest of the cosmos since the dawn of time, you are not sensing the other person. You are literally accessing their data because, on the fundamental layer of the hardware, you are them. The synchronicity is just the moment when the lag drops, and you realize that the privacy of your own mind is an illusion. You are not a standalone computer. You are a terminal logged into a mainframe that has never stopped calculating everything at once. If the idea of a quantum server feels too abstract, let's look at a case study that proves your life is scripted on a much cruder, wetter level. We are going to talk about the Jim twins. This is the gold standard for the argument against free will. It is the story that makes psychologists sweat. In 1940, two twin boys were born in Ohio. They were separated at birth, adopted by different families, and raised completely apart. They never met. They never spoke. They didn't know the other existed. 39 years later, they found each other. And when researchers compared their lives, the data looked like a glitch in the simulation. Both families, independently, had named the boys James. Both Jims grew up and became law enforcement officers. One a sheriff, the other a security guard. Both Jims enjoyed carpentry and mechanical drawing. Both Jims married a woman named Linda. Both Jims divorced Linda. Both Jims then remarried a woman named Betty. Both Jims named their first son James Allen. One spelled it Allen, the other Allen, but the sound was identical. Both Jims had a childhood dog named Toy. Both Jims chain-smoked Salem cigarettes. Both Jims drove a light blue Chevrolet. When they met, they realized they had been living the exact same life, down to the brand of nicotine and the name of the household pet, for 40 years. Now, look at that list again. You like to believe that you chose your car because you liked the color. You think you chose your wife because you fell in love with her soul. You think you chose your career because it called to you. But the Jim twins prove that these choices are hard-coded subroutines. How can two separate men choose the name Toy for a dog? How can they both choose a woman named Linda? It implies that what you call your personality is just a biological algorithm executing a specific seed code. The DNA didn't just determine their eye color, it determined their taste in women, their addiction to nicotine, and their preference for Chevy sedans. If they were puppets, then so are you. You are walking through a life that feels like improvisation, but every time you turn left instead of right, you're just following a track laid down by your protein strings before you took your first breath. The script is in the blood, and you cannot rewrite it. If the Jim twins prove that your personal choices are hard-coded in your DNA, this next theory suggests that your skills and ideas aren't even located in your brain at all. We are taught that learning is a local biological process. You read a book, your neurons fire, synapses form physical bridges, and the data is stored inside your skull like files on a hard drive. It feels private. It feels contained. But a Cambridge biologist named Rupert Sheldrake suggested a theory that got him stabbed by the scientific establishment. He called it morphic resonance. He proposed that memory is not stored in the brain. He argued that the brain is not a hard drive. It is a radio receiver. The files are stored in a non-local field called the morphic field, essentially a cloud storage for the entire species. This sounds like fringe madness until you look at the rats. In a famous series of experiments cited by Sheldrake, researchers at Harvard taught a group of laboratory rats to escape a complex water maze. It was difficult. It took the rats hundreds of attempts to learn the route. That is normal. But here is the anomaly. Once the Harvard rats mastered the maze, researchers in Australia, on the other side of the planet, placed a completely unrelated group of rats into an identical maze. These Australian rats had no contact with the Harvard rats. They were genetically distinct. There was no physical way for information to travel. But the Australian rats solved the maze significantly faster. They learned it almost immediately. It happened again and again. The more rats learned the trick in place A, the easier it became for rats in place B to learn it. It implies that learning is not a private act. When the Harvard rats solved the puzzle, they uploaded the solution to the species-wide cloud. The Australian rats didn't have to figure it out from scratch. They just downloaded the update. This explains why new ideas often appear to multiple inventors at the same time, like calculus being discovered by Newton and Leibniz simultaneously, or the telephone being invented by Bell and Gray on the same day. They weren't stealing from each other. They were both logged into the same morphic field, and the file had just finished uploading. This is the horror of the network theory. You think you're having an original thought. You think you're a genius for solving a problem, but in reality, you're just a terminal accessing a public folder. Your epiphanies are just data packets that someone else paid for with their suffering, and you are just the antenna that happened to be tuned to the right frequency to catch the signal. Biological fields are hard to measure. Biology is squishy and wet, but if this cloud really exists, we should be able to detect it with hardware. We should be able to see the static electricity of the human hive mind affecting machines. In 1998, researchers at Princeton University decided to build a ghost trap. They launched the Global Consciousness Project. They set up a network of 70 devices called eggs scattered across the globe, from Alaska to Fiji to Berlin. Inside each egg is a hardware random number generator, RNG. It uses thermal noise to generate a stream of zeros and ones. It is essentially an electronic coin flipper. It flips a coin thousands of times a second. According to the laws of statistics, over time, the result should always balance out to 50-50. The graph should be a flat line of white noise. The machines are shielded. They are isolated. They are not connected to the internet. Nothing should be able to influence them. But the Princeton researchers found that the machines are not indifferent. When a massive emotional event hits the human population, the machines stop being random. During the funeral of Princess Diana, the graphs spiked. During the opening ceremony of the Olympics, they spiked. The electronic coins stopped landing randomly and started landing on heads in unison all over the world. The data suggests that intense, synchronized human emotion creates a physical field, a noosphere, that imposes order on chaos. We are literally willing the entropy of the universe into structure just by feeling something together. The odds of these spikes happening by chance are calculated to be 1 in a trillion. This implies that the Earth has an EEG. We are the neurons of a planetary brain. When we panic, the planet panics. When we focus, the planet focuses. So, synchronicity might just be the result of you getting caught in a thought spike generated by millions of other people. You aren't experiencing a personal miracle, you are just being swept up in the brainwave of the collective organism. But the scariest data point from this project wasn't a reaction to a funeral. It was a reaction to an event that hadn't happened yet. And this anomaly breaks the timeline of history completely. We said that the Global Consciousness Project machines react to human emotion. That makes sense. We see a tragedy on TV, we panic, and the noosphere spikes, cause and effect. But on September 11th, 2001, the machines broke the rules of causality. When the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m., the random number generators went wild. That is expected. The world was watching in horror. But when the researchers looked closer at the timestamps, they felt a chill go down their spines. The data didn't start deviating at 8:46 a.m. The spike began 4 hours earlier. At roughly 4 a.m. New York time, while the hijackers were still sleeping, while the passengers were making coffee, while the towers were standing silent in the dark, the 70 machines scattered around the planet suddenly synchronized. The white noise turned into structure. The entropy dropped. It was as if the planet itself had gasped before the blow landed. This anomaly suggests that the global mind is not bound by linear time. The collective unconsciousness of humanity somehow felt the trauma of the future event and reacted to it before the physics of the event had actually occurred. It implies that massive emotional energy creates a shockwave that travels backwards through time. The shadow of the event fell upon the timeline before the object cast it. If this is true, then intuition isn't a magical guess. It is a memory of the future. The reason you sometimes feel a bad feeling before a disaster is that, on the quantum level, the disaster has already happened to you, and the echo is rippling back to warn your present self. The future isn't a blank page, it is a train coming down the track, and the rails are vibrating long before you see the engine. This brings us to Act 4, and the concept that might be the most claustrophobic idea in physics, the block universe. If the future can send shockwaves back to the past, it means the future must already exist. It must be solid. To understand how detailed this solid future is, we have to look at a book that shouldn't exist. In 1898, an obscure American writer named Morgan Robertson published a novella called Futility. It was a story about the hubris of man. In the book, Robertson describes the largest ocean liner ever built. He calls it the Titan. He writes that the Titan is considered unsinkable by its builders. He describes it as the pinnacle of luxury. In the story, the Titan sets sail across the Atlantic in the month of April. It is moving too fast through dangerous waters. One night, it strikes an iceberg on its starboard side. Because the ship is considered unsinkable, it doesn't carry enough lifeboats. The Titan sinks, and nearly all the passengers freeze to death in the North Atlantic. Does this story sound familiar? 14 years later, in 1912, the Titanic set sail. The real ship was named Titanic, almost identical to Titan. It was the largest ship ever built. It was called unsinkable. It hit an iceberg in April. It didn't have enough lifeboats. Even the technical specs were nearly a perfect match. The fictional Titan was 800 feet long. The real Titanic was 882 feet. The Titan had a speed of 25 knots. The Titanic had 24. Both had 3 propellers. Morgan Robertson wasn't a psychic. He wasn't a prophet. He was just a struggling writer trying to pay his rent. But the theory of the block universe suggests that Robertson committed an act of chronological plagiarism. He didn't invent the story. He accidentally accessed a memory leak. If all of time exists simultaneously, like a DVD that contains the beginning and the end at the same time, then the information about the sinking of the Titanic was already on the disc in 1898. It was just located a few inches to the right on the timeline. Robertson's brain just happened to glitch. It read the data from the future sector of the hard drive instead of the imagination sector. He thought he was writing fiction, but he was actually writing a news report for a tragedy that was already set in stone, waiting for the actors to arrive on set. If Morgan Robertson's prediction of the Titanic feels like a lucky guess based on engineering trends, this next case destroys that defense. It involves the master of macabre, Edgar Allan Poe, and a coincidence so specific that it feels like a glitch in the simulation's character naming protocol. In 1838, Poe wrote his only complete novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. It is a brutal story about a shipwreck. In the book, 4 survivors are trapped in a lifeboat in the middle of the ocean. They are starving, dehydrated, desperate. After days of agony, they make the horrific decision to kill and eat one of their own to survive. They draw straws. The loser is the young cabin boy. The other 3 men kill him and feast on his body. Poe named this fictional cabin boy Richard Parker. The book was published. It was read as dark fiction. But 46 years later, in 1884, reality decided to plagiarize the plot. A real yacht named the Mignonette sank in a storm on its way to Australia. 4 real men escaped in a lifeboat. They drifted for weeks without food or water. Driven mad by hunger, the 3 older men decided to kill the youngest member of the crew to save themselves. They stabbed him in the neck and ate him. When the survivors were finally rescued and brought to trial, the world learned the name of the real cabin boy who was eaten. His name was Richard Parker. This is not a vague prediction. This is not a cold reading. Poe didn't just predict the shipwreck. He predicted the number of survivors, the act of cannibalism, and the exact first and last name of the victim. The odds of picking the name Richard Parker for a character who suffers that specific rare fate are astronomical. This suggests that Poe wasn't inventing a story. He was unknowingly viewing a remote sector of the timeline. The event of the Mignonette disaster was so traumatic. The sheer psychic weight of the murder was so heavy that it burned a hole through the time block and leaked backward into 1838. Poe thought he was writing a novel, but he was actually writing a police report for a crime that hadn't been committed yet. It implies that creativity is often just an act of remembering the future. How is it physically possible for a writer to remember the future? To answer that, we have to destroy your perception of now. You experience time as a flow. You think the past is gone, erased from existence. You think the future is a blank void waiting to be filled. You think the present is the only thing that is real, moving forward like a spotlight in the dark. But in 1908, Hermann Minkowski, the teacher of Albert Einstein, looked at the math of relativity and realized that our human perception is a lie. He famously declared, "Henceforth space by itself and time by itself are doomed to fade away into mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two will preserve an independent reality." He proposed the concept of the block universe. Imagine a loaf of bread. One slice of the bread is the Big Bang. Another slice is the Jurassic period. Another slice is your birth. Another slice is your death. In the block universe, the whole loaf exists at once. The bread is baked. It is a solid, 4-dimensional crystal frozen in eternity. The dinosaurs are not dead in the sense that they are gone. They are just located at a different coordinate in the block, just like New York is located at a different coordinate than London. If you could fly down the time axis, you would see the T-Rex still hunting right now. They are still screaming in the past, just as you are reading this in the present. This means that now is an illusion of consciousness. It is just the point where your biological needle happens to be touching the record. But the whole song is already pressed onto the vinyl. This is why prophecies and memory leaks happen. The future events, the sinking of the Titanic, the death of Richard Parker, are already there. They are physical structures in the 4D crystal. Sometimes, the light from those future events refracts through the block and hits a mind in the past. But the horror of the block universe is what it says about your freedom. If the future is already a solid object, you cannot change it. You cannot curve the track. Your death is not a potential outcome. It is a place. It is a physical room waiting for you down the hall. You're walking toward it, and every step you take, every breath you breathe, was frozen in the crystal 13 billion years ago. You're not living your life, you're just watching the playback. If the block universe sounds like a philosophical nightmare, you might try to comfort yourself by saying it is just a theory. You might say, well, Minkowski was a mathematician, not an experimentalist. Nobody has actually touched the future. But in 1978, the physicist John Archibald Wheeler proposed an experiment to do exactly that. And when we finally built the technology to run it, the results broke the arrow of time. It is called the delayed choice quantum eraser. To understand the horror of this test, we have to revisit the double slit experiment. When a photon flies toward two slits, it has a choice. If you're not watching, it acts like a wave and goes through both slits at once. If you are watching, measuring, it acts like a particle and picks one path. That is standard quantum weirdness. But Wheeler asked, what happens if we delay the decision to look? In his version of the experiment, the photon is fired. It passes through the slits, it travels across the room, it is mid-flight. The event of passing the slits is essentially history. It is in the past. After the photon has already passed the slits, but before it hits the back wall, the scientist makes a random choice. He can either turn on the sensors to see which path it took, or keep the sensors off. Common sense screams that the choice made now cannot affect the path taken then. The bird has already flown. You can't tell a bird to fly differently after it has already landed. But the experiment showed the impossible. If the scientist decided to measure the photon after it passed the slits, the data showed that the photon retroactively became a particle in the past. If the scientist decided not to measure it, the data showed that the photon retroactively became a wave in the past. Read that again. The decision made in the present, time t2, rewrote the physical history of the particle in the past, time t1. It implies that the photon somehow knew what the scientist was going to do in the future. It sensed the trap before the trap was set. Or, more terrifyingly, the act of measurement sent a command signal backwards down the timeline to edit the script. This destroys the idea that the past is immutable. If a subatomic particle can change its history based on a future event, then cause and effect is just a suggestion. The effect can create the cause, and if reality works this way at the bottom, then the history of your life is not a fixed record. It is a fluid document that is being constantly edited by the events of your future. So, the future can edit the past. This opens the door to a radical new model of physics proposed by the Israeli physicist Yakir Aharonov. It is called the two-state vector formalism. Usually we think of time like a river pushing us from behind. We believe that the state of the universe right now is determined solely by what happened 1 second ago. The past pushes the present. But Aharonov looked at the math and said, that is only half the equation. He argued that a quantum system is defined by two vectors. One vector comes from the past, the history vector. But a second vector comes from the future, the destiny vector. The present moment, the reality you're experiencing right now, is not a solo act. It is the crash site where the wave from the past collides with the wave from the future. To prove this, Aharonov developed a technique called weak measurement. This allows physicists to gently probe a particle without fully collapsing it, catching it in a state of honesty before it has time to hide. The results of these experiments are mind-bending. They show that particles often possess information that they cannot possibly know based only on their past. They hold data about measurements that haven't happened yet. The only way they could have this information is if the future event is already real, and it is broadcasting a signal back to them. Think about what this implies for you. You feel like you are pushing your way into the future, making choices. But Aharonov's model suggests you are actually being squeezed. You are trapped between the wall of the past and the wall of the future. The you of 10 years from now is just as real as the you of 10 years ago. And that future version of you is exerting a gravitational pull on your present actions. If you are destined to be in a car crash in 3 days, the two-state vector theory suggests that the crash is already sending a ripple back through time. That ripple might manifest as a sudden decision to check your brakes, or a gut feeling to take a different route. We call it intuition. We call it a hunch. But physics calls it retrocausal interference. You aren't guessing the future. You're feeling the impact of the wall you're about to hit. The destination is already dictating the journey. We have talked about how the universe might be a solid block of pre-written time, but you still have a defense mechanism. You can say, I feel free. I can choose to wiggle my finger right now. See, I did it. I am the captain of this ship. But in 1983, a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet performed an experiment that relieved the captain of his command. Libet wanted to map the exact timeline of a free choice. He hooked subjects up to an EEG machine to measure electrical activity in the brain. He placed a button in front of them and gave them a simple instruction. Press the button whenever you feel like it. He also asked them to watch a precise clock and note the exact millisecond when they felt the conscious urge to move. The sequence of events should be obvious. Step 1. You decide to press the button. Conscious will. Step 2. The brain sends a signal to the hand. Motor command. Step 3. The finger moves. Action. But when Libet looked at the data, the timeline was scrambled. The EEG showed a spike of electrical activity in the motor cortex, called the Bereitschaftspotential or readiness potential, that began to rise a full 500 milliseconds before the subject reported feeling the urge to move. Half a second is a long time in neurology. It is an eternity. This means the brain had already made the decision, prepared the muscles, and launched the sequence before you, the conscious self, had any idea what was happening. The decision was made in the dark. Your feeling of "I decided to do this" was just a memo delivered to your consciousness after the fact. It was a notification on your screen saying, "Action complete." Libet's experiment suggests that consciousness is not the CEO making the decisions. Consciousness is the PR department whose job is to explain the decisions made by the deep machinery of the brain and claim credit for them. You are not driving the car. You are a toddler with a plastic toy steering wheel in the passenger seat, believing you are turning the wheels while the car drives itself. And if you aren't even in control of a simple finger movement, how can you possibly claim ownership of the complex path of your life? Critics tried to attack Libet's experiment. They said half a second isn't enough to prove anything. They said the equipment was primitive. They tried to save free will by arguing about the margin of error. But in 2008, John Dylan Haynes at the Max Planck Institute in Germany updated the experiment using modern fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. And he didn't just widen the gap. He turned it into a canyon. In this version, Subjects lay inside an MRI scanner. They held 2 buttons, one in the left hand, one in the right. They could choose to press either one at any time. The scientists watched the blood flow in their brains in real time. They fed the data into a pattern recognition algorithm. The computer was trained to look for the specific neural signature of left versus right. The results were terrifying. The algorithm could predict which button the subject would press with 60% accuracy, significantly above chance, not half a second before, but 7 seconds before the subject was consciously aware of the choice. In some trials, the gap was up to 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Count that out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. For that entire duration, the decision was already made. The chemical die was cast. The signal was traveling through your cortex. The outcome was locked. But you, the conscious observer, were still sitting there thinking, maybe I'll pick the left one. You felt like you were debating. You felt the tension of choice, but it was a hallucination. The biological machine had settled the matter 10 seconds ago. This proves that the subconscious isn't just a helper, it is the master. You are a biorobot running a script that is generated in the deep, inaccessible darkness of your neural net. When you meet someone and feel a connection, or decide to walk down a specific street where you find a lost book, you aren't making those choices. Your hardware is executing a command that was processed seconds, maybe minutes, maybe years ago. Synchronicity, then, is just the moment when the PR department, you, finally looks out the window and notices where the driver, the brain, has taken the car. You didn't synchronize with the universe. The universe just synchronized with your code. If we combine the data from Libet, Haynes, and the block universe, we are forced to construct a model of human existence that is deeply uncomfortable. We have to strip away the vanity of self. We usually imagine the brain as a top-down hierarchy. We think we, the conscious voice in our head, sit in the Oval Office, reviewing data and issuing commands to the body. But the neuroscience proves the hierarchy is inverted. The consciousness is not the president. It is the press secretary. Its job is not to make policy. Its job is to stand at the podium after the policy has been enacted by the deep state of the neural networks and explain it to the public. It constructs a narrative of, I did this because, to make sense of an action that was inevitable. This gap, the 7 seconds between the neural choice and the conscious thought, is the buffer zone where the illusion of free will is generated. If you perceived your actions at the exact moment your neurons fired, you would feel like a machine. You would feel your arm moving before you wanted it to move. You would be terrified of your own body. So, evolution created a user interface. It created a delay. It created a lag that allows the brain to stitch the will and the action together in a seamless movie, hiding the gears grinding underneath. This turns you into a biological robot. A highly advanced moist robot, but a robot nonetheless. And this radically changes the definition of synchronicity. When you experience a startling coincidence, like thinking of a song and hearing it, it isn't because you influenced the universe, it's because the script of the universe influenced you. Your subconscious, which is entangled with the environment and reading the future coordinates of the block universe, knew the song was coming. It processed the sound waves or the probability vector seconds before the event. It triggered the thought of the song in your conscious mind just in time for the audio to start. You didn't predict the future. You were just notified of the incoming data packet a few seconds early. Synchronicity is not a spiritual connection. It is a timing error. It is what happens when the press secretary gets the memo before the event actually hits the newswire. It is a glitch in the illusion that you are separate from the timeline. You are not the author of the story. You are just the screen where the movie is being projected. And sometimes, the audio sync is just a little bit off. Now that we have questioned the hardware, the brain, we must question the software, the world. Because if the brain is just a reactive machine, then the environment it reacts to is suspiciously optimized. There is a phenomenon you have definitely experienced. It is called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, or the frequency illusion. It happens when you learn a new word, or notice a specific model of car, or hear about an obscure historical figure for the first time. Suddenly, over the next 48 hours, you see that word 3 times. You see that car everywhere. The obscure name pops up in a YouTube video. It feels like the universe is listening to you. Psychologists have a very boring explanation for this. They call it selective attention, controlled by the reticular activating system, RAS, in your brainstem. They say the red car was always there, but your brain was filtering it out as useless noise. Once you tagged it as important, the filter stopped blocking it, and now you see reality as it truly is. That is the comfortable answer. But looking at it through the lens of simulation theory, there is a much more efficient, technical explanation. It is called asset loading. If you are building a massive open-world video game like Grand Theft Auto or Cyberpunk, you have a problem. RAM is limited. You cannot keep every single model of car, every pedestrian face, and every dialogue line loaded in the memory at the same time. It would crash the system. So, the engine cheats. It uses a technique called lazy loading. It only loads the assets that are currently required by the player. But here is the catch. Once an asset is loaded into the fast, short-term memory, RAM, the computer wants to keep using it. It is cheaper for the processor to render the same red car 5 times in a row than to dig into the hard drive and find 5 different cars. This is why in video games, you often see the same NPC walking past you twice, or the highway filled with the exact same model of sedan. The Baader-Meinhof effect looks suspiciously like this optimization algorithm. When you learn a new word, you are essentially loading that asset into your active cache. The simulation, striving for efficiency, decides, okay, the player has this file open, let's use it again to save processing power. So it spawns that word in a news article. It spawns it in a conversation. It isn't a mystical sign that you're on the right path. It is a sign that the rendering engine is lazy. It is reusing the textures you just looked at because generating a unique, chaotic world for every second of your existence is a waste of computational energy. You are seeing the repetition because the system is saving resources. If the Baader-Meinhof effect suggests the universe recycles data to save RAM, this next concept suggests it is saving graphics processing power, GPU, by deleting the world behind your back. We operate under the assumption of object permanence. It is a cognitive skill you learned when you were 6 months old. If you put a ball in a box and close the lid, you assume the ball is still there. You assume that the room behind you, which you cannot see, is fully furnished, lit, and solid. But if you were designing a simulation to run on a machine with finite power, rendering the room behind the player would be a criminal waste of resources. In computer graphics, specifically in engines like Unreal or Unity, there is a technique called frustum culling or lazy loading. The engine calculates exactly what the camera can see. It renders the geometry inside that cone of vision in high definition. But the moment an object leaves the frame, the moment you turn your head, the computer deletes it. It unloads the geometry. It stops calculating the light physics. Behind the player's camera, there is nothing. There is no world. There is just a black void of unrendered code waiting to be called up. This sounds like a tech metaphor, but quantum mechanics suggests it is the literal truth of our reality. Remember the electron. It has no position until you measure it. It has no render until the camera points at it. This implies that the universe is extremely efficient. It does not waste energy existing where it doesn't have to. This leads to a terrifying paranoia. When you walk into an empty room, the furniture didn't exist a second ago. The simulation hastily loaded the chair and the table at the exact millisecond your optic nerve requested the data. It popped in. The silence you feel in an empty house isn't just solitude, it is the hum of a system on standby. If you turn your head fast enough, could you catch the universe glitching? Could you see the wireframe before the texture loads? Physicists argue that the speed of light might actually be the speed of causality, the maximum speed at which the processor can update the screen. The universe has a lag limit. You cannot go faster than light, because the computer cannot draw the next chunk of the map any faster than that. You are trapped in a render bubble, surrounded by a void that only solidifies when you look at it. If the environment is a hollow shell, what about the people inhabiting it? We like to believe that humanity is a rich tapestry of 8 billion unique souls. We cherish our individuality. We think that nature has infinite creativity. But if you look at the phenomenon of doppelgangers, it looks less like creativity and more like procedural generation. In games like No Man's Sky or Minecraft, the computer creates an infinite universe using a simple set of rules. It doesn't handcraft every tree. It uses Perlin noise, a mathematical algorithm that mixes variables to create variations. It takes a nose shape, variable A, an eye color, variable B, and a jawline, variable C, and mixes them. But algorithms have a combinatorial limit. There are only so many ways you can arrange a human face before you run out of distinct combinations. Eventually the noise repeats. Eventually the algorithm has to reuse a seed. We are seeing this happen in the real world. There are websites dedicated to twin strangers, people who are genetically unrelated, born on different continents, but look identical down to the spacing of their pores. In a truly random biological world, this should be statistically impossible. The genetic variables are too complex to repeat perfectly by accident. But in a procedural simulation, it is inevitable. The doppelganger is not a long-lost twin. It is a reused character model. The system ran out of unique facial assets, so it just spawned face_ID_49204 in New York and face_ID_49204 in Mumbai, hoping the two players would never meet. But because of the internet, the network, we are meeting. We are seeing the duplicates. This turns synchronicity, like seeing a stranger who looks exactly like you, into a bug report. It means you are not a unique biological entity. You are a permutation of a finite code. You are a collection of sliders in a character creation menu. Intelligence, 6, charisma, 4, height, 5.8, and somewhere else on the server. The RNG rolled the exact same stats for another NPC. The horror isn't that you have a double. The horror is that neither of you is real. You're both just instances of the same class, running the same animation loops, convinced that you are the protagonist. To understand why the simulation would create a world full of repeating patterns and eerie coincidences, we have to look at the economics of information. We have to look at the hard limit of storing data. In 1948, a mathematician and engineer named Claude Shannon published a paper that created the modern digital world. He invented information theory. Shannon defined a concept called information entropy. In simple terms, entropy is a measure of how much surprise is in a message. If I send you a file containing 1 million random letters, XQKZ, that file has maximum entropy. It is pure chaos. Every letter is a surprise. To store that file, you need a lot of bits. You have to record every single character individually because there is no pattern. Chaos is expensive. Chaos takes up massive amounts of hard drive space. But if I send you a file with the letter A repeated 1 million times, that file has 0 entropy. There is no surprise. You don't need to record 1 million A's. You just write a tiny piece of code that says, print A 1 million times. The file size drops from megabytes to bytes. This is how a zip file works. It looks for redundancy. It looks for patterns. It deletes the repetition and replaces it with a short reference code. Now, apply this to the universe. If the universe is a simulation or a mathematical structure, It has to process data. It has to store the state of every atom. If every atom moved randomly, if true chaos existed, the universe would require infinite processing power and infinite memory to track it all. It would be an uncompressible file. The system would overheat. So, the system optimizes. It craves low entropy. It craves order. This means the laws of physics aren't designed to create freedom. They are designed to create compression. Gravity clumps matter into spheres, stars, planets, because a sphere is the mathematically simplest shape to describe. Fractals in nature, ferns, coastlines, lungs, are used because a single equation can generate infinite complexity. The universe forces atoms into lattices, crystals, and DNA helixes because pattern is cheap. Chaos is a luxury the system cannot afford. The reason you see structure everywhere isn't because structure is beautiful. It is because structure is the only way to keep the file size of reality small enough to run on the hardware. This leads to the compression theory of synchronicity, and it turns your magical moments into digital artifacts. When you experience a startling coincidence, like meeting a person who has the exact same name as you, or buying a shirt that matches the paint on a car that drives by, you feel a sense of awe. You think, what are the odds? But under Shannon's logic, the system wants the odds to be high. The system is actively trying to reduce the number of unique assets it has to render. Think of the timeline of your life as a long video file. If every moment of your life was unique, the file would be huge. So the simulation applies a compression algorithm to your destiny. It looks for opportunities to copy-paste. Instead of generating a unique stranger for you to meet, it reuses a template, the doppelganger. Instead of generating a unique random number for the clock, it repeats the pattern 1111. Instead of generating a unique plot twist for your life, it recycles a plot twist from your parents' lives, the Jim twins. Synchronicity is what happens when the compression algorithm gets aggressive. It is a lossy compression. Just like a JPEG image gets blocky and pixelated if you compress it too much, reality gets blocky when the entropy is squeezed out. The coincidences are the JPEG artifacts of existence. They are the moments where the universe said, I don't have the bandwidth to calculate a new random event for this human, so I'm just going to loop a previous event and hope they don't notice. This explains why people report more synchronicities when they are in high stress or transformational periods. High stress consumes more biological processing power. The system compensates by lowering the resolution of the environment. You aren't seeing signs from angels, you are seeing the pixels. You are seeing the seams where the universe stitched two identical patches of fabric together because it ran out of unique thread. Your destiny is just the result of the cosmos trying to save disk space. If synchronicity is the artifact of compression, then déjà vu is the artifact of a system crash. You know the sensation. You're in the middle of a conversation or walking into a new room, and suddenly, a wave of cold familiarity washes over you. You feel with absolute certainty that you have been here before. You know exactly what someone is going to say before they say it. Mystics tell you this is a memory from a past life. They say your soul is remembering a previous incarnation. But neuroscience offers an explanation that is far more disturbing, because it implies your brain is a malfunctioning hard drive. To your brain, now and then are just different folders. Usually when you experience an event, the sensory data goes into a temporary buffer called short-term memory. A fraction of a second later, it is processed and filed into long-term memory. There is a strict order of operations: input, process, archive. But sometimes, the wiring shorts out. Neurologists believe déjà vu occurs when there is a mismatching in the neural pathways, specifically in the rhinal cortex. The sensory data of the present moment accidentally skips the short-term buffer and gets written directly into the long-term archive. Think about what that does to your consciousness. You are perceiving the moment as you are remembering it. You are reading the file at the exact same millisecond you are writing it. Your brain flags the input as a memory because it found the data in the long-term folder, but it just put it there. It is a timestamp error. It is a write error on the server. In the movie The Matrix, they explain déjà vu as a glitch, a sign that the agents were changing something in the code. A cat walks by twice because the system looped the footage to cover up a patch. The write error theory suggests this is literally true. When you feel déjà vu, you're catching the simulation in a stutter. The frame froze, the server lagged. For a brief moment, the timeline desynchronized, and you saw the refresh rate of your own reality. It proves that your perception of time is fragile. You aren't flowing through time. You are being rendered frame by frame. And sometimes, the renderer drops a frame, forcing you to watch the same second of your life twice while the system tries to catch up. So we have write errors, compression artifacts, and procedural generation. At this point, the idea that we are living in a digital construct stops being a stoner thought and starts being a statistical probability. In 2003, a philosopher from Oxford named Nick Bostrom published a paper that formalized this nightmare. It is called the simulation trillemma. Bostrom argued that any technological civilization must fall into one of three categories. Option 1. They go extinct before they reach a post-human stage of technology. They blow themselves up with nukes or AI before they can build a computer powerful enough to simulate a universe. Option 2. They reach that level of power, but they simply have no interest in running simulations. They become bored gods and stop playing games. Option 3. They survive, they have the power, and they do run simulations. Here is the trap. If option 3 is the truth, if advanced civilizations run ancestor simulations to study their history, they wouldn't just run one. They would run millions. They would run billions. A single computer the size of a planet could simulate the entire mental history of humanity in a microsecond. So, if simulations exist at all, then for every one real, biological, base reality, there are billions of fake simulated realities. This creates a dizzying math problem for your identity. If you are a conscious being, and there are billions of simulated beings for every one real being, what are the odds that you are the real one? The odds are 1 in a billion. It is statistically insignificant. It is effectively 0. If you believe that humanity will survive into the future, rejecting option 1, and if you believe we will keep playing video games, rejecting option 2, then logic demands that you accept option 3. You are almost certainly not in the real world. You are an NPC, non-player character, or a digitized consciousness living inside a server farm in the year 5000. This explains everything we have discussed. It explains the pixels, Planck length. It explains the speed limit, speed of light. It explains the glitch, synchronicity. It explains why the universe follows mathematical laws, because it is math. We are not discovering the laws of nature. We are reverse engineering the source code of the engine that is rendering us. The reason the math works so perfectly is that there is nothing else underneath it. There are no atoms. There is only the grid. The most common argument against the simulation theory is the argument of complexity. You look at the world around you, the jagged shape of a mountain, the turbulent flow of water in a river, the unpredictable movement of a crowd, and you think, no computer could program this. It is too messy. It is too rich. You believe that complexity requires a complex creator. You assume that to simulate a universe this detailed, the source code would have to be infinite. But in the 1980s, a physicist and computer scientist named Stephen Wolfram proved that assumption is dead wrong. Wolfram was obsessed with cellular automata. These are incredibly simple digital programs. Imagine a piece of graph paper. You color in one square at the top. Then, you set a rule for the row below it. A simple rule, like, if the square above is black, make this one white. If the square above is white, make this one black. It is binary. It is basic. It is a child's game. Wolfram tested every possible variation of these rules. Most of them produced boring patterns, straight lines or repeating checkerboards, but then he found Rule 30. When he ran this specific simple line of code, the pattern didn't repeat, and it didn't die out. It exploded into chaos. It generated a structure of infinite complexity. It created triangles, jagged lines, and unpredictable swirls that looked exactly like the shell of a sea snail, or the growth of a forest, or the static of the cosmos. Wolfram discovered computational irreducibility. He proved that you don't need a complex god to create a complex universe. You just need a very simple seed code and enough time to let it run. This implies that the source code of our reality is not a library of billions of lines. It is likely a single, elegant equation, perhaps as short as Rule 30, that has been iterating since the Big Bang. What you call physics is just the pattern emerging on the graph paper. What you call biology is just a subroutine of that pattern. And synchronicity? In Wolfram's grid, sometimes independent lines of chaos suddenly converge and create a perfect triangle for no apparent reason. It looks like design. It looks like a miracle, but it is just an artifact of the iteration. We are living inside the output of Rule 30. The complexity of your life, your emotions, your memories, your soul, is just the visual result of a simple mathematical operator flipping bits from 0 to 1 for 13 billion years. The world isn't messy because it's real. It's messy because the algorithm is efficient. This brings us to the final act. If the universe is a finite system running a code, and if energy cannot be created or destroyed, we face the ultimate horror of thermodynamics. We face the question, what happens when the deck runs out of cards? We usually view death as the end. We view the heat death of the universe as the end. We think the screen goes black and the story is over. But in 1890, the French mathematician Henri Poincaré proved that the end is a mathematical impossibility. He formulated the Poincaré recurrence theorem. The logic is indisputable. Imagine you have a box full of gas particles. You shake the box. The particles fly around randomly. The box is a closed system. The energy inside is finite. The volume is finite. Poincaré proved that the number of possible positions for those particles is huge, but it is not infinite. There is a limit. It is like a deck of cards. There are a lot of ways to shuffle a deck, 8 followed by 67 zeros. But eventually, if you keep shuffling, you will repeat a sequence. You will deal the exact same hand twice. The universe is just a very big box of gas. You are made of particles. The Earth is made of particles. Poincaré's math dictates that if you wait long enough, the random shuffling of the atoms in the universe must return to the exact state they are in right now. Not a similar state. The exact state. This means that far in the future, after the stars die, after the black holes evaporate, and after the entropy maximizes, the quantum fluctuations of the void will eventually reshuffle the atoms back into the configuration of the Big Bang. And the script will restart. The stars will burn again. The Earth will form again. You will be born again. You will grow up in the same house. You will have the same friends. You will make the same mistakes. You will click on this video at the exact same moment. This is not reincarnation. In reincarnation, you learn and change. This is recurrence. You will have no memory of the previous loop. So you will make the exact same choices, feel the exact same pain, and think the exact same thoughts. You have already had this conversation 1 trillion times, and you will have it 1 trillion times more. This turns the block universe into a loop universe. You are not just trapped in a solid crystal of time, you are trapped on a carousel that never stops spinning. Every moment of synchronicity you experience is just a signpost you have passed an infinite number of times before. You feel like you know what is coming next because, on a deep physical level, you have already lived it. You are trapped in the eternal now. If Poincaré provided the mathematical proof of the loop, Friedrich Nietzsche provided the psychological horror. In 1882, long before quantum mechanics or the Big Bang Theory, Nietzsche famously posed a question that is known as the heaviest weight. He asked, what if, one day or night, a demon were to steal into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, this life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. And there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself, the eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and you with it, speck of dust. For most people, this idea is a metaphor. It is a poetic thought experiment about cherishing the moment. But if you combine Poincaré's recurrence theorem with the block universe, Nietzsche wasn't writing poetry. He was writing a prophecy. In a deterministic universe that recycles its atoms, eternal recurrence is the physical law of the land. This means that you are not reading this text for the first time. You have sat in that chair, felt that specific boredom, and scrolled through this specific video trillions of times before. And you will do it trillions of times again. You cannot change the channel. Because you have no memory of the previous loops, you feel like you are making fresh choices. You feel the anxiety of the future. But there is no future. There is only the script. This transforms your life from a journey into a performance. You are an actor who has been playing the same role on Broadway for eternity. But every night, before the curtain rises, someone wipes your memory. You walk onto the stage with total sincerity, believing the drama is real, unaware that you have hit the same mark and said the same line in the exact same tone forever. The weight that Nietzsche talked about is the crushing realization that nothing is transient. Nothing passes. Every mistake you make is immortal. Every tragedy is permanent. You're trapped in the amber of the eternal now, and the exit door does not exist. Is there any escape? Usually when we feel trapped by fate, we look to quantum mechanics for a rescue. We say, but wait, atoms are random. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle says the future isn't fixed. We cling to the idea that at the bottom of reality, there is a roll of the dice that allows for freedom. But there is a theory that kills that hope. It is called superdeterminism. It was championed by Nobel Prize winner Gerard 't Hooft. He looked at the randomness of quantum mechanics and said, "This isn't magic. We are just missing the variables." Superdeterminism suggests that the reason quantum particles look random and the reason they seem to communicate faster than light, Bell's theorem, is that the game is rigged from the start. In a standard science experiment, we assume the scientist is free. We assume Alice can choose to measure the electrons spin up or spin down freely. But superdeterminism argues that Alice is made of atoms, and her atoms were forged in the Big Bang, just like the electron she's measuring. Therefore, the Big Bang set up a cosmic conspiracy. It correlated the state of the electron with the state of Alice's brain billions of years in advance. The universe programmed the particle to be spin up at the exact moment it programmed Alice to decide to measure spin up. It is like a magician doing a card trick. You think you have a free choice to pick any card, but the magician has arranged the deck, the lighting, and your angle of vision, so that you must pick the ace of spades. You feel free, but the outcome was forced. If superdeterminism is true, then the randomness of the universe is a lie. It is just a lack of data. It implies that there are no probabilities. There is only one path. The decision you made to click this video, the thought you are having right now, the time you will go to sleep tonight. These are not choices. They are simply the result of a domino chain that started 13.8 billion years ago. The universe isn't playing dice, it is playing a recording. And because the scientist, the equipment, and the particle are all dancing to the same pre-written tune, We can never prove otherwise. We are puppets who have been programmed to believe we can see the strings, but even the act of looking is part of the show. If superdeterminism says the script is locked, we have to ask, what is the script printed on? We still cling to the idea that the universe is made of stuff, hard, physical matter moving through time. But two radical physicists, Julian Barber and Edward Fredkin, have dismantled this idea and replaced it with something purely abstract. Julian Barber argues that time does not exist. In his theory, the universe is not a movie playing on a screen. It is a pile of photographs scattered on a floor. He calls this Platonia. Every possible arrangement of the universe, every now, exists simultaneously as a static, frozen point in this mathematical landscape. There is a now where you are reading this sentence. There is a now where you are eating breakfast. There is a now where you are dead. These moments are not connected by a flow of time. They are just separate coordinates. The illusion of motion and time is created only because your consciousness, the spotlight, is jumping from one static frame to the next, like a needle skipping across a vinyl record. But Edward Fredkin goes deeper. He asks, what are the frames made of? Fredkin was a pioneer of digital physics. He proposed the finite nature hypothesis. He argued that at the bottom of the rabbit hole, there are no electrons, no quarks, and no energy fields. There are only bits. Just like a computer screen looks like a photograph from a distance but dissolves into red, green, and blue pixels. When you zoom in, Fredkin argued that the universe is pixelated. An electron is not a physical object. It is a register in a cosmic memory bank holding the value 1. Empty space is just a register holding the value 0. This is the principle of it from bit. Every physical object is just the result of a yes/no question asked by the void. If Barber and Fredkin are right, then you are not a biological entity moving through history. You are a software cursor moving across a static database. Synchronicity, then, is what happens when the cursor jumps a track. It is a pointer error. You accessed a memory address, a now, that was mathematically similar to the one you just left, creating the illusion of a coincidence. The universe isn't happening to you. You are just passing the code of a frozen eternity. If we accept the logic of digital physics, if we accept that the universe is a script composed of bits executed by a rendering engine, then logic forces us to ask the final, forbidden question. Who wrote the code? In science, we try to avoid the word God. It carries too much baggage. It implies a bearded man in the clouds who cares about your sins. But in the context of simulation theory and the block universe, God is not a religious figure. God is a functional necessity. You cannot have a program without a programmer. You cannot have a simulation without a system administrator. If the constants of physics, gravity, light speed, Planck length, are the settings of the engine, then someone had to set them. Someone had to compile the code. But this God is not the benevolent father of religion. If you look at the source code of our reality, the entropy, the suffering, the inevitability of death, the rigid mathematical laws, the architect looks less like a loving parent and more like a cold, efficient mathematician. Or worse, an AI. We might be running inside a procedural generation algorithm that was launched and then abandoned. The glitches we see, the coincidences, the déjà vu, the paradoxes, might be happening because the system admin hasn't patched the server in 1 billion years. This reframes your entire existence. You are not a child of God. You are an instance of a class. Your struggles, your pain, and your questions about destiny are just the runtime behavior of a complex algorithm trying to resolve itself. Does the programmer care about the NPC? Does the user care when Mario falls into a pit? Probably not. The purpose of the simulation might not be your happiness. It might be to solve a physics equation, or to generate black holes, or simply to see what happens when you let 1 trillion monkeys play with nuclear weapons. We are trapped in a script written by an entity we cannot comprehend, executing commands we didn't choose, moving toward a game over screen that was hard-coded before the first star caught fire. We are the output of a machine that is indifferent to our joy. And that realization brings us to the only choice we have left. So, where does this leave us? We have spent the last 4 hours systematically destroying your autonomy. We have proven that your brain is a biological robot, Libet. We have proven that your world is a hologram, holographic principle. We have proven that your future is a solid block of ice, Minkowski. And we have proven that you are trapped in an infinite time loop, Poincaré. Logically, the reaction to this information should be despair. If you are in a cage that you cannot break, the natural instinct is to scream, to panic, or to give up. But Friedrich Nietzsche, the same man who terrified us with the eternal return, offered a solution. He offered a key that doesn't unlock the door, but makes the room livable. He called it Amor Fati. Translated from Latin, it means love of fate. This is not passive resignation. This is not saying, I guess I have to tolerate this. It is an active, aggressive acceptance. It is the decision to look at the script of your life, with all its pain, its mistakes, its losses, and its inevitable death, and say, yes, I want this. I would not change a single line. If superdeterminism is true, you are an actor in a movie that has already been filmed. You cannot change the ending. You cannot improvise the dialogue. But a bad actor fights the script. A bad actor stands on stage wishing he was in a different play. He looks awkward. He suffers. A great actor accepts the role completely. He merges with the character. He delivers the tragic lines with as much passion as the triumphant ones, because he knows they are necessary for the arc of the story. If you fight the current of the river, you drown. If you try to swim upstream, you exhaust yourself. But if you accept that the river is flowing exactly where it needs to go, you can float. The realization that randomness doesn't exist is actually the ultimate liberation from anxiety. Anxiety comes from the belief that you could have done better. You lie awake at night thinking, if only I had turned left, or if only I had said that. You torture yourself with alternate timelines, but physics tells you there are no alternate timelines. The electron could not have spun down. You could not have turned left. The mistake was mandatory. The pain was required. There is no path not taken. There is only the path. Once you truly internalize this, once you realize that the script is locked, the weight falls off your shoulders. You stop trying to be the writer, and you start enjoying being the viewer. You stop judging your life, and you start witnessing it. Amor Fati is the refusal to wish for a different reality. It is the courage to stand in the center of the trap, look at the bars and say, this is exactly where I am supposed to be. We started this journey asking if synchronicity was a glitch. We asked if those strange, impossible coincidences, the book on the subway, the beetle in the window, the dream of the sinking ship, were cracks in the wall of reality. We thought that maybe, if we stared at them long enough, we could find a way out. We thought they were clues to a hidden exit. But now we know the truth. These anomalies aren't cracks. They are the rivets. They are the structural beams of the block universe showing through the plaster. They are the evidence that the structure is solid, interconnected, and unbreakable. You thought that a coincidence was a chance to change your destiny? No. A coincidence is the sound of the lock clicking shut. It is the universe reminding you that the gears are meshing perfectly. Your life is a train running on a track laid down by the Big Bang. You can't steer. You can't hit the brakes. You can't switch rails. That sounds terrifying to the ego. The ego wants to drive, but there is a strange, cold beauty in the machine. A train that cannot turn also cannot get lost. A train that is on rails never has to wonder where it is going. You are hurtling through the dark, propelled by forces you didn't choose, toward a destination you didn't pick. But you are not alone. You are entangled with every other atom in the cosmos, riding the same rail, part of the same grand deterministic equation. So, don't be afraid of the script. It's a good story, and you have the best seat in the house to watch it unfold. The paradox of the trap is simple. The only way to be free is to realize that you never were. The glitch isn't an error. The glitch is the proof that the system is working. If you made it this far into the deep end, you are exactly the kind of observer this algorithm was looking for. If this journey shifted your perspective on reality, hit the like button. It helps the signal reach other conscious minds in the network. I want to know what you think. Is the idea of a scripted universe a comfort to you, or a prison? Does Amor Fati make you feel free, or does it make you feel small? Leave your verdict in the comments below. I read them to remind myself I'm not the only one staring at the ceiling. And if you want to peel back more layers of the source code with me, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. We have a lot more blueprints to examine. Thank you for watching. With you was Acronium.